Israelis will be out on the streets, queuing up yet again. Fifth time in just 4 years. The government has collapsed in the country, so it's a new election, but with the same old issues. There are 4 key players here. Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to make a comeback. Prime Minister Yair Lapid, who is seeking a re-election. Current Defence Minister Benny Gantz, who is eyeing the top seat. And Itamar Ben-Gvir, a far-right leader targeting his niche base. All eyes are mostly on Netanyahu. He has served as the Prime Minister for longer than anyone else in Israel's history. He is in the middle of many corruption cases, but that might not affect his popularity. Netanyahu will most certainly be the largest party in the Knesset this time. They will probably win about 30 seats, which is a quarter of the total. He has vowed to expel leaders who are disloyal to the country. And giving a tough fight to Netanyahu here is the current Prime Minister Yair Lapid. His last time's ally, Naftali Bennett, is not running this time. So Lapid is at a desperate disadvantage. His calculations are hanging by a thread. Even a slight drop in turnout could push him out of the Knesset. Israel has a parliamentary system made up of many parties, none of which have ever received enough votes on their own to secure a majority. A similar scene is going to play out this time as well, which just means that parties will have to team up to form the government. And with coalitions comes differences as well. To form a government, Netanyahu or Lapid both will require help. And this is why the smaller parties tend to become the kingmakers here. 61 seats are needed to head the country. It's a debut for Defence Minister Benny Gantz, with the new National Unity Party is aiming for a strong showing. Netanyahu has already vowed not to partner with gangs. Religious Zionist Party is eyeing for a coalition to sit on the ruling side. Experts say it would be the largest extreme right-wing group ever seated in Israel's parliament. Security and surging prices have topped the list of voter concerns. However, the voters are exhausted, and this could hurt voter turnout in the elections as well. In fact, reports say that it is expected to be historically low this time. Voters say that the elections have become like rolling the same dice again and again. The same few leaders keep contesting on the same issues that they've been fighting for years now. Decades-old issues with Palestinians, it's a common topic of flare-up. 3 Palestinian blocs are also running, but the future looks dark for them. The parties are unlikely to garner enough votes to pass the threshold required to enter the parliament. Last election was the first time an Arab party was part of the ruling government. This year it looks uncertain. Now, for more on this, we're being joined by Mir Javed Anfar, who is a West Asia analyst from Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice to be with you.
Now, there are 4 key figures, as I mentioned earlier, in the elections this time around. How do you assess the prospects of a conclusive election this time?
It's very difficult to predict. It's really 50-50 in that 50% chance that Netanyahu will win and 50% chance that the anti-Netanyahu camp led by Prime Minister Lapid will win. It's very, very difficult to predict. And we have to wait and see. To be honest with you, this could be Prime Minister Netanyahu's last election, because, as you quite rightly said, this is the 5th elections in 4 years. In none of the elections until today he's been able to form a government, and if he fails to form a government, if he fails to win enough seats to form a government again, his position in Likud could come under question. So Prime Minister Netanyahu knows this. He's come out with all guns blazing. He's got he has the longest record for the post of Prime Minister in Israel's history. He's a very experienced, very shrewd, very capable political operator and a politician. He could win, but this is going to go down to the wire. It's going to go down probably to the last 1,000 votes. Every vote counts for either side in these elections, and we have to wait and see if Prime Minister Netanyahu, if former Prime Minister Netanyahu could become Prime Minister again. But this is an election, to be quite frank. It's very difficult to call out the result because the country is so split.
Right, absolutely. Well, you've raised some very interesting points there. Now, with elections being held for the 5th time in almost 4 years, what would you say are some of the major concerns of the people, apart from the ones that I've mentioned? What do you think is the mood on ground this time around?
I think there among the Arab sector in Israel. Let's not forget about 20% of Israelis are Arabs, and Arab compatriots they feel let down by the constant elections. They feel let down that their needs are not being really met. I have to actually also blame some of our Arab politicians for this, but they feel that also the Jewish politicians are not serving their interests and representing their needs, and they could be fallen in the number of Arab voters in the elections. Another reason is, of course, is one of the major Arab parties, the Joint List, split. And out of the three parties, only two decided to form a coalition. This could actually dilute the number of seats that Arab Israelis could have in the Israeli parliament. So one of the major issues is for Arab Israelis in that they believe that they are not being well represented, and their socio and economic needs are not being represented. And are not being addressed. But there's also Jewish Israelis who feel that in this country, they feel the other way. They believe that they are being threatened by Palestinians. Israel is not being hard enough on the issue of terrorism. We had the riots here 3 years ago, which were between Jews and Arabs, which led to a rise in Jewish extremist parties because some synagogues were set fire to. So this is why we could see, for the first time in Israel's history, a very right-wing extremist party win as many as 14 seats. So this is another issue which we also have to address. It's the rise of extremism in Israeli policy. Basically, overall, I would say there are an increasing number of Israelis who are feeling that despite all these elections, their goals and their needs and their priorities are not being met.
All right. Well, Mr. Mir Javed Anwar, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast with your insights on this.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.